Brandywine. I wanted to get to share one of the series of my favorite authors, John Flanagan. All of his series do take place in the same universe, but they're broken up into like different groups. So I wanted to share the very first series with you guys. And that series is the Ranger's Apprentice series. These are the 12. Kind of heavy. Okay. I found out about this series after they had already started. So the first 3 books are paperback and the rest are all hardcover. And I know I mentioned earlier that I hate having hardcover books, but John Flanagan's books are the one exception to that, or one of the exceptions to that rule. I actually try to get the hardcover books and get them all before they're in paperback. So the 12 books, the first one is The Ruins of Gorlan. And then we have the Burning Bridge. I wanted to call it the Red Bridge for some reason. And Iceland Bound, which is still in this country. I don't know what I'm thinking about. So Aurelian is, I want to say it's England's equivalent, but I could be wrong on that one. I know it's definitely in that area. Then the Battle for Scandia, which takes place in Scandinavia. You can see the Vikings. And then Eric's Ransom, which takes place in Arida. It's Arrida. And you can see the curved sword in the desert and the camels. It's based off of North Africa and Arabia. And this was actually the 7th book. You can see it's the number 7. But chronologically, it takes place between the 4th and the 5th books. And then we have The Sorcerer of the North and The Siege of Mackinac, which are, like, they're together. The storyline wasn't finished in the first book, so you continue it in the 2nd book. And then we have The Kings of Clonmel, which, I think Clonmel, it's the neighboring country. I want to say it's like Scotland or Ireland. I can't remember because it's been so long since I've read them. I really want to go back and read the whole series again. And then we have Holt's Peril and The Emperor of Nihonja, which takes place in Japan. And you can see it says that it was the final battle. It was supposed to be anyway. I think this was before he planned on writing all the other series, so he said it was the final battle. And then we have The Lost Stories, which is number 11. And this is all like the small stories that didn't necessarily follow in the main storyline, but they were still cool behind the scenes stories type things, like Jenny's story and just a bunch of different stuff like that. And then book 12, which I talked to you guys about before, it's The Royal Ranger. It was supposed to be the last book in the Ranger's Apprentice series, but now it's its own series. But I still wanted to show it to you guys because it does have the number 12. It is part of it. I love this series. So the synopsis, or the basic plot of the story, is I want to say this is Will, the main character, but Will's supposed to be 15 years old in this book, and he kind of looks like an adult to me, so that could be Holt. But the fief, so the whole country is broken up into a bunch of little fiefs, and the fief that the main character lives in has wards of the fief, so like orphans. I think they were mostly like orphans of richer people. They weren't necessarily like poor, super dirt poor people, but because all their families were known except for Will, who doesn't know anything about his parents. But I think he became a ward of a state because of the circumstances behind his father's death. And so there's 5 wards. There's Will, who's our main character. There's Horace. There's Jenny. There's Alice. And then there's George. And so when they turn 15, each of these wards get to choose who they're going to become apprenticed to, and that's going to determine who they're going to grow up to be. Like Alice chooses to be part of the messenger service. That has a name, and I'm blanking on what it is, but they're more than just messengers. They're really cool. They're like politicians, ambassadors type thing. They go into more detail as she learns more about it. And then there's Jenny, who's my personal favorite out of the 5, because she gets apprenticed to I forget his title, but Chubb, who's the like castle cook, and she ends up becoming one of the like greatest cooks in the whole kingdom. And I love that because I love food. And then George, who becomes a scribe, and Horace, who goes to the battle school. And I love it because they follow the story arc of all 5 kids. Mostly it's Will because he's the Ranger's apprentice, but follow their story arc all the way through till they're grown up. And I love to see how their personalities change. Like kids that weren't necessarily nice kids or got along when they were little became like best friends when they were adults and stuff. And so I really loved that. And then for each fief, there's one ranger, because they are so like skilled that you only need one ranger per fief. And what the rangers do is they handle like espionage, they handle battles, they handle pretty much stopping things before like they get big, and then handling things when they do get big. The kingdom has its normal problems, you know, barons that were banished because they were evil and they're coming back and trying to take over, or bandits that are in the woods and they're attacking everyone, or boars that are going crazy and killing everyone. And so the rangers pretty much handle everything. And so like they'll go in and they'll like interview people and like find out what's going on. They're super, super highly trained in weaponry, especially with the bow. That's like their longbow is their main weapon. Except in the case of one of the rangers who is an expert swordsman. The rest of them, well, he's still an expert bowman, but the rest of them are like mainly expert bowmen. And I love it because when Holt is teaching Will how to use the bow, he has the saying, and he says it more than once, I think. And it is, we don't practice until we get it right. We practice until we don't get it wrong. And I love that quote. I love that quote. But there's just like, I noticed like some people even started like doing costumes for them because they're getting pretty popular. I mean, they're awesome. But they always wear like this really dark cloak. Like they show a black cloak in this picture. And actually, yeah, they show a black cloak in this one too. But their cloak, if I remember correctly, is camouflage actually, because like a lot of what they do is espionage. So they'll like go into the shadows. And if they don't move, you can't see them because they blend in so well, which is why a lot of people that aren't part of their group think that they have magic. And so a lot of people are actually really scared of them. And they don't do too much to get rid of that reputation because it actually helps them get information out of people if the people think they're going to turn them into frogs. And he started writing the series because his son wasn't interested in reading. And he was trying to get him into reading. And so he started writing these stories and telling him these stories to try and get him interested in it. And then they were so awesome that he just kept writing the stories. And now we have them. And he actually lives in Australia, so in the United States they get published a little bit late, so I get to see the posts on Facebook, and I'm like, the next book's coming out, and I don't have it yet, and I won't have it. But, like, he's also one of the few series where I love to read the flaps, where they talk about the author. Like, I'll read those at the end of the books, but I'm usually not that interested in them. But when you read the flaps on the back of these books, they get more interesting each flap. And so, like, starts out telling his story of, like, how he started writing the books, and it's, like, super serious. And then it gets, like, goofier and goofier. And, well, I don't think goofy's quite the right word, but it gets more entertaining. How about that? And so I loved reading the author flaps. It was, like, one of my favorite author flaps. But I also loved that it took place in, like, all these different countries. Because, I mean, you've got the desert, you've got Scandinavia, you've got Japan, and, like, the other series, like, go to other countries, too. So I loved that we got to see all these different countries that were kind of like how they were back in medieval times. Obviously, the stories are all fiction. The countries interact differently than they would for, like, the real countries, probably. Especially when they go to Nihonja, because I'm pretty sure Japan was closed off to visitors at that time. But, in this book, they get to go in. And I love the adventures that they have. I think, like, the Emperor of Nihonja focuses a lot on Horus and how he interacts with the Emperor of Nihonja, because he ends up having to protect him and help him and, like, instigate this whole war because someone's trying to have a coup and, like, he has to protect him. But, like, I love the stories. There is, like, some material that, like, I don't want to say it's heavy because obviously these are, like, middle school-ish books, but, where is it? I just had it. In this one, the Battle for Scandia, Will and the princess of the country, Evelyn, get kidnapped by the raiders, because the Vikings are still raiders at this point in the story, and they get kidnapped and they get taken back to Scandia, and they are put into slavery, and they give the slaves these this drug that, like, it totally messes them up. They are so drugged up, they cannot function, pretty much. Like, they can do their basic job, but basically, if you're on this drug, you don't live for very long. It's super highly addictive. It completely destroys. And it takes a while for Evelyn to get Will off of this drug, and it's really, really bad when he like gets off of it because he goes through such bad withdrawals. But I thought it was like really interesting because I was reading it and I was like, he is totally like, this whole book is like an anti-drug book. Like anti-drug propaganda almost, and I loved that because I'm like, oh my gosh, my kids are gonna read this book and it's gonna be an anti-drug propaganda hidden in the form of an awesome medieval storytale. And one of the reasons I have all the books is because I really want my son to read all these books because I think they're really fun. I also think this series is one of those series that's really good for introducing kids to reading that aren't necessarily into reading because it's action-packed from the beginning. And I think boys love it and girls will love it. It does mostly center around a male character, but I honestly, I think both boys and girls will love it. I have run into kids reading this book, like, just out in the world, and I always get so excited because I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that series, such a good book. And so, like, I know, like, kids love this book, adults love this book, everybody loves this series. So if you haven't read it yet, and you do like fantasy adventure stuff, I would say definitely try it out. Even if you don't like fantasy adventure, I mean, at least read the first book. It's super fast, and I think, like, you'll like it. I love the series. I think it's a great series. So definitely give it a try out. And I will see you guys next time when I talk about his next series, The Brother Band Chronicles.